Ray, 86, became ill, and the only person who could care for him was his granddaughter, Macy. No other members of Ray's family were still alive to help him. So when Macy declined because she didn't care enough, he was shocked and realized that his time in this world might be coming to an end. Ray decided to teach Macy a lesson after he passed away. A few weeks later, Ray passed away quietly in a hospice. Macy was unaware of the plans her now deceased grandfather Ray had for her. She just knew that she needed to talk about the inheritance her father had gifted her with the notary. That was all Macy wanted to hear. But there was no money available. Ray had instructed the notary to personally deliver a letter of the utmost significance to Macy. Macy's life had not gotten off to the best start, but her grandfather Ray always tried his best to support her and improve her life in whatever way he could. Macy's parents had died in a motor accident when she was only 5 years old. Her widower grandfather took it upon himself to give her the greatest possible childhood, but the incident left a lasting impression on the little girl. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and click the notification bell for more amazing stories. She was a quiet child and grew into a numb, solitary adolescent. Ray's efforts to help her were useless. At 16, Macy moved out of her parents' house to live with a former boyfriend. Ray tried to stay in touch with his granddaughter, but she frequently didn't return his calls. This broke his heart. Macy always appeared to be preoccupied or unavailable. One day, Ray developed a severe illness and passed out in the street. An ambulance was called, and he was taken to the hospital. Although the physicians were able to save the old man's life, he was unquestionably still in danger. He had had a terrible stroke, and he was no longer the same person. He required a lot of assistance with routine daily tasks, and always would. Even though Ray could afford to hire a home nurse, he didn't want to leave Macy with anything. So, he asked Macy, his remaining family, for assistance. He knew what her response would be, but hoped for better. She didn't say much other than a terse expression of compassion. Throughout the brief talk, Macy made it obvious that she was utterly unable to take care of her grandfather at this time. Ray wasn't sure, though, how accurate this was. He'd been monitoring his granddaughter to be at least somewhat informed of what was happening in her life. He knew Macy was residing in a modest one-bedroom apartment in a sketchy part of the city. Ray had no idea what Macy was doing or the people she was friends with, but he had the impression that she was more concerned with claiming her fortune than she was with taking care of him in his last days. He only saw her when she needed money. He couldn't say no to her, despite knowing the money wasn't put to good use. After his call with her, he decided to teach her a lesson. It would hopefully make her life better, even after he was gone. Macy genuinely loved Ray, and she knew he was upset with her. Things have been for her, and she didn't want to hurt him by telling him how bad things were. It was painful to learn of her grandfather's stroke, and she didn't want to burden him further. She was in a lot of debt. Even though she detested doing it, she occasionally had to beg Ray for money to keep her head above water. After a long day of tedious errands for one of the individuals she owed money to, she received a call from an unknown number. The caller told her Ray had died peacefully in his sleep. Macy was distraught. On the phone, the hospice nurse reassured Macy that Ray had already planned his cremation, but Macy was still required to be present for the reading of the will. Despite her anguish, she understood the will. Macy heard the word and immediately thought of money. Why was giving her one more chance to get out of debt? Ray wasn't particularly wealthy, but he'd leave her some money. She didn't see the surprise coming. Macy had received no money from Ray. At least, not yet. Ray had written a note outlining Macy's requirements for receiving the bequest. She was to attend job interviews at a list of the companies Ray had sent her resume to. He started the letter by apologizing to Macy for lying to her all her life. This grabbed her attention. He said he had a secret life, and it was time to tell her. He had a fortune he amassed illegally and was unable to spend it. He would be noticed and arrested by the police. But now that he was gone, he could give Macy the fortune. She only needed to locate it. But Macy would soon learn that Ray had something entirely different in store for her. The notary was in on Ray's plans and the contents of the note, but feigned ignorance. Ray wanted Macy to believe that nobody else knew what was going on. Macy said there was nothing special in the letter when the notary asked, and left immediately. Macy hurriedly left the office with the letter. She wanted to get to the money as quickly as possible so she could begin using it. Macy went to Ray's former residence. She was instructed to use the code at the bottom of the letter to open it. Because of the stroke, Ray could not use a key. As she didn't have to bother about finding a key, it was undoubtedly easier for her. Macy regretted not knowing that her grandfather Ray was thus frail when he passed away. There were many more of these heartbreaking realizations for Macy within the house. Ray was no longer able to use the stairs. The bed had been moved to the living room, and the smell made even doing the dishes impossible. The toilet had what appeared to be unstable bars for Ray to pull himself onto. Considering how little she had done to assist him, she felt a great deal of guilt. Macy felt sick to her stomach watching the entire scene. She couldn't escape her past. She was forced to look around and pay attention to what happened in this house. The message instructed her to search the area that had always stayed the same. That location, however, might be difficult to locate given that the entire house was torn apart so that Ray could continue to live there. But it didn't take long for her to realize her room was the only spot her grandfather never remodeled. She pondered on what may be waiting for her when she opened the door. She hadn't visited this place in a very long time. There was a large suitcase on the bed with a sturdy lock on it. It appeared as though it could easily be the letter's response. Perhaps it held all of that money. However, how was she to open it? The letter had no information concerning a padlock. She attempted to enter the house's code, but it was unsuccessful. Did she miss something? Then Macy heard sirens outside while searching the room for something to pry open the suitcase with. She couldn't ignore them. She hoped that the cops weren't there for her or this place because there were officers outside the house. She hadn't done anything wrong, so it had to be for something else. However, it did not take her long to start hearing banging on the front door. Macy became anxious. She was standing here with a suitcase stuffed with money that was obtained illegally, and the police had issued a warrant for her arrest for missing a court hearing. She would be doomed if the cops found her and the money. Most importantly, they would deprive her of her money. She needed to get away with the suitcase full of cash. However, how was she going to pull that off? The officers were already banging on the door so forcefully by this point that it would soon be broken. She was very certain that's exactly what they would do if she didn't come out. She heard the police entering the house and yelling once she was in the basement. "The police are here. Identify yourselves." In search of Macy, the cops searched the entire residence. When she heard the basement door open, her heart slumped. She heard the policeman talking on his phone. "We cannot locate her." She probably ran away. As the basement door shut, Macy exhaled in relief. The coast is clear, she reasoned. Macy's mouth opened in shock when she turned on the light in the basement. Her granddad was lying on the other side of the room. He was on a ventilator, but he was still breathing. The basement door opened. Macy didn't know what had struck her. Her grandpa started to laugh as he realized how far he could still go. He said that everything had been staged. There was no actual police. He had hired actors to show her how she had been living lately, hoping she would feel guilty about it. He requested that Macy open the bag she was lugging. To her amazement, it was packed with outdated newspapers. She was at first furious, but after a few minutes, she realized that she deserved it. It became clear to Macy what her grandfather spent the last weeks planning. She shouldn't have behaved in this manner with her granddad. Macy intends to take good care of her grandfather. Thanks to his lesson, she is trying to get her life back on track. She would never abandon her grandfather again. Binding bonds through beautiful tales. Thank you for watching.